Thanks, Neil, for the terrific introduction. Thanks also to UC Riverside for having just the best poke bowls. I love poke, I love sushi, and I kid you not that I don't know of any better poke bowl than the one you can get right down the way. Let me start from the beginning and tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I've come to this charge that we actually have to fix things and the belief that we can fix things. I grew up in a low-income household in Orange County. I was raised by a single mom who worked hard to make sure that me and my brother never felt like we were less than. How many of you in this room were raised by a single parent? Yeah. And without asking you to show your hands, think about the times, even if you weren't raised by a single parent, growing up that you felt the overhang of stress and anxiety in your household about economic or money issues, right? Well, that's what it was like in our household as I look back. By the time I was leaving for college, my biological father had put our family deep into financial debt, and the house I had grown up in was foreclosed and we were kicked out of it. I was fortunate to borrow my way through Harvard, and I was a liberal activist in college, and my focus was do good. I even took a year off and worked on Al Gore's presidential campaign as a junior member of the advance team, running around the country setting up events. And that conviction about do good was born of the most important thing that my mom instilled in me and my brother, which is when change is needed, you don't ask permission to make or fight for change. And I can tell you a couple of anecdotes of when that started to manifest early in my life. When I was 8 years old, I remember watching with my mom this special on 2020 about how Ceausescu was mistreating the orphans in Romania, of course, among a list of a whole other terrible set of human rights abuses that he conducted. And I was so upset by it that, remembering I'm 8 years old, I told my mom I wanted to write a letter to Ceausescu. So I did, and I had to confess, I forgot about this letter until just about 2 years ago when I was visiting with my mom and we were reflecting and reminiscing, and she said, I actually have a copy of the letter. So first of all, she sent it. Whether it was received is a different question. And she brushed off the copy of the letter and it said, Dear Dictator Ceausescu, my name is Joey Sanberg. I'm 8 years old. I live in California, and I think you are a real asshole for how you're treating orphans. It's funny, right, for so many reasons, but it speaks to the rage we should show towards atrocity and evil. The provocativeness of we actually have to fix things is that we should be angry and rageful that there are so many things still broken. When I reflect back on those formative years when I started really understanding and looking at the world around me, and I think to the issues that I observed and the problems that I experienced firsthand and reflect on the problems that we see in the world today, it makes me angry. All of the problems that I saw as a 13-year-old and even an 8-year-old still exist, except they're multiples or order of magnitudes worse. The problem that really awakened my political sensitivities, this notion of the persistent economic anxiety that grips almost everyone, is mathematically gripping almost everyone. 75% of American families couldn't weather a $700 financial shock. Now, when you can't weather that kind of financial shock, which means anything bad happens to your health that insurance doesn't cover, anything happens to your car, house, whatnot, your kids, your pet, you're screwed. That puts you in this constant fight or flight state that frankly robs your ability to be fully human. That's what a supermajority of Americans are facing literally every single day. Even when I talk with audiences that are extremely wealthy, And I challenge them to reflect on those times in their lives when maybe they got a little bit over their skis financially. And even among wealthy people, most have experienced that at one time or another. And then you challenge them to think about what it would be like if you experienced that persistent stress at every moment of the day, every sleeping minute of the night. Then you create actually an interesting sense of solidarity that we're all in this together, which is the premise of why actually fixing things really matter. I think that there's something about each of us that you can't quantify. That every single person in this room is totally different from everyone else. That if you wanted to do a segment analysis of humans, you'd need a number of cells in Microsoft that equal the number of humans alive. That one of the reasons why, in my view, so many things that were broken when I was a teenager are even more broken today is that we in business, politics, media, and the academy have approached people like units of consumption, or units of production, or units of votes, or units of readership, reducing everything about us into something that is quantifiable, measurable, can be captured by a letter, or moved around in Microsoft Excel, which is treating all of us as something that's not human. And if you think about all of us as something other than human, then really what difference does it make if we don't solve these problems? What difference does it make if tens of millions of people live in, quote, economic inequality? These are just descriptors in a spreadsheet or in a Word document. But when you remember that we're talking about human beings, and there's something special about being human that can't be reduced into Microsoft Excel, and if you believe, as I do, that we're each created to do something important in our lives, that we're each created to perfect creation in ways small, medium, and large, then actually it matters a whole heck of a lot that we fix things. So back to being a liberal activist in college. When I came back from working on the Gore campaign and ready to graduate Harvard, I was faced with the reality of needing to support my mom, pay all of her expenses out of college. And so begrudgingly, I went to the Career Services office and applied for some jobs in the financial industry, and started my career as an analyst at Blackstone, evaluating leveraged buyout transactions. What I later learned is I was hired as a practical joke, that they wanted to see what would happen if they'd bring in this liberal do-gooder to analyze leveraged buyout transactions. The person who hired me at the time, who was about 10 years my senior, later became a friend of mine and recounted this to me. But in the spirit that necessity is the mother of invention, I figured out how to analyze leveraged buyout transactions because, well, I wasn't and I'm not passionate about those. I was very passionate about paying my mom's bills. I continued as a young partner at a small investment firm that became large called Tiger Global, and this is during the lead up and period of the financial crisis. And I saw firsthand what we all saw from some degree of distance, which is that the financial industry came to serve itself. That in this moment in history, the financial industry became the perfect example of unanchoring a business or a sector from anything that's human. If you think your customers are cells in Microsoft, then what the heck difference does it make what kind of mortgage you put them in, or how you do or do not make available to them the kinds of financial opportunity they need to provide for their kids, right? That is actually at the perfect underpinning of the great financial crisis, that an entire industry, and I would argue an entire economy, became completely unanchored from understanding that its customers are human beings that are important and matter in this world. And so towards the end of that experience coming out of the financial crisis, I really started to examine whether this is what capitalism means, or whether this was rather the product of a group of people that didn't know really what anything human means. And the conclusion I reached actually was that the problems are with the people, not as much the system. Sometimes when I speak to business schools, I'll often ask students, what's the definition of capitalism? And a shocking number of people still tell me the definition of capitalism is about maximization of profit. But there's actually nothing in the definition of capitalism that's about maximizing profit. This notion of short-termism, this what I call the fetish of the shareholder, is actually a very recent phenomenon that dates only back to the mid-70s, when a group of folks at the University of Chicago cooked up this idea that the company exists for profit and shareholder returns instead of serving customers. Now let's contrast what those two approaches mean and how they implicate on whether we believe customers and stakeholders are human beings or whether we're all just stewards of a Microsoft Excel model. If you believe that businesses exist to serve customers, then you create businesses that are oriented towards the other and are premised on understanding what people need. Because if you don't understand what human beings actually need, you won't be able to serve them something they want, and you won't have much of a business. But if instead you believe that businesses are about maximizing shareholder value, which is numerical, mathematical, and completely removed from anything spiritual or metaphysical, then what the heck difference does it make what happens to your customers and your stakeholders? And so it's that very recent phenomenon in American capitalism, in my judgment, that led up to everything we saw in the financial crisis. And as I've come to reflect, is not idiosyncratic to the financial industry. As I mentioned earlier, the hallmark of all the problems I think that have intensified in the last 30 years are treating people like units of things. In the financial industry, it was about treating people like units of borrowers or units of customers. But in the political industry, the same problems are manifested in treating people like units of voters. The relationships are entirely transactional instead of service-oriented. And so what do we do about it? And how do we actually fix things? It first starts by reimagining and then recreating the kind of relationship that is at the bedrock of the parts of our lives that are really broken. And so I think you can take 5 areas of our lives that really occupy the super majority of the pain that we all suffer. Those are financial services, food, healthcare, education, and government. Now, those are 5 of a lot of sectors, but those are 5 sectors that I would say occupy most of the suffering that is unaddressed in our society. And at the heart of each of those 5 sectors is this transactional nature of a relationship. And so to fix any one of them, you have to flip the relationship and turn it instead into a service-oriented one. So the first experiment I made with this was when I founded Blue Apron with a really good college friend of mine, Matt Salzberg, who's the CEO. And the genesis of Blue Apron was considering that so few people were eating together at home anymore, and understanding that that was happening because people were working more jobs. You had more 2 working parent households. You had bigger issues of food deserts where healthy food to buy and cook at home just weren't readily available. And so we thought, well, what if you actually built a company that made it easier for people to eat together at home? You would do a lot of good for a lot of people, and you'd build a really meaningful and sustainably valuable business in the process. And so that's what became Blue Apron. Delivers 10 million meals a month now, continuing to grow really rapidly, and millions of people are eating together at home, cooking. And there's a lot of depth to the importance of that. Those 5 sectors that are broken in my view, financial services, healthcare, education, food, and government, their brokenness interacts. The fact that the food sector doesn't sufficiently deliver healthy choices to most people, and especially not to low-income people, is at the basis of why we have a diabetes epidemic in the country, right? And so I take really seriously what Blue Apron's doing, because the families that we're reaching with better healthy meals over and over are families and kids that are less likely to develop diabetes over time. And so as Blue Apron gained a level of scale, I turned my focus to the financial industry. And I recognize I'm biased because I'm spending my time trying to fix the financial industry, but I think that if you accept the pretext that we are in a free market democratic capitalism, that there is 0 chance this can all work well for everyone if the financial industry, which lubricates the movement of the raw ingredient of free market democratic capitalism is broken and fundamentally is existing to serve a small number by restricting opportunity from everyone else. And that's basically how the financial industry has worked. It serves a small number by restricting opportunity from everyone else. It's built on this completely failed notion, not just immoral, but empirically failed notion that the prosperity for some requires the acute anxiety of everyone else. It's failed because if we're all interconnected and a free market democratic capitalism is largely based on consumption, then if most everyone who needs to buy things have no money, then the people who own things have no customers. And so reflecting on how you actually fix this, and my broader diagnosis that the brokenness is about the relationship, you have to recreate the kind of relationship that exists between the financial industry and people. The relationship that exists presently is an extractive relationship. The financial industry basically exists by charging fees associated with services that are not value add to you all. Fees like ATM fees, fees like overdraft fees, fees like service accounting fees. All of these things that are not attached to anything you enjoy of value, right, are at the center of the financial industry's profit. And so that has to be totally changed. And the byproduct of that presently is people hate financial companies, and with darn good reason. And that adversarial relationship is endogenous. The more financial companies screw people, the more they hate them, the more expensive it becomes for financial companies to acquire new customers and retain customers, the more they need to impose extractive fees on those customers. You see the negative cycle. And so our founding proposition at aspiration.com is you have to build an entirely different relationship between financial companies and people. And we do that in the following ways. First, we reach people at the heartbeat of their financial lives, which is the banking account. Almost everyone has a banking account, and almost everyone hates their banking account in its current form. Second, we have to distribute real power in the relationship to customers, not power that's rhetorical or imagery-based, like whales in a TV commercial or whatever, but actual real power. And the way we do that is the only revenue that we earn in our banking account and in the investment services that we deliver around the banking account are based on the voluntary fees that customers choose to pay us or choose not to pay us. At Aspiration, you can pay zero for our banking and investing services, and you're served just the same. Next, we own the fact that the financial industry and therefore financial companies have a special responsibility in a democratic capitalism to heal the world. And so we donate 10% of what our customers choose to pay us to microloans for low-income Americans. Because as broadly as we've built Aspiration, the reality is no matter how sustainable the company, no matter how progressive and visionary its founders, there are going to be people that don't have enough money to have a bank account, period, and that you need to serve through nonprofits and through the public sector. And we think as a financial company, we have a responsibility to participate in that. So we've made ourselves the most charitable financial firm in America by donating and committing 10% of our revenue to charity. Next, we stand for something and values that are aligned with our customers, because more and more people, especially in my generation and in Gen Z, believe that we should match our values and our money. And in fact, I think this is one of the great potential awakenings that Aspiration is catalyzing. We have thought a lot over the last many decades about how we organize ourselves as workers, but we've thought very little and done even less around organizing ourselves as consumers. But companies are extremely sensitive to the movements of their consumers. And we should demand and expect that we can exert power with our money, right? How many of you in this room would consider yourself an environmentalist? Raise your hand. All right. Now, I won't ask you to raise your hand and answer this next question. I'll just ask you to ponder. How many of you who raised your hand have a banking account at Wells Fargo, Chase, or Bank of America? Just think to yourself. You won't have to raise your hand. you are funding the development of extractive projects with that banking account that is in direct violation of your values. That's just a fact. It is, right? And I'm sure among those who raised their hand, many have said recently to friends or family, gosh, I wish there was more I can do. I wish there were small things I could do every day. Yet you are giving your deposits to banks that are absolutely using that same money that you gave them to lend to fossil fuel projects, and in particular and specifically to Dakota Access Pipeline. And so Aspiration doesn't fund those kinds of things, which is what I mean by empowering people to match their values and their money. Now, I hope you'll decide to move from one of those companies to Aspiration. There are other companies that also don't fund that stuff. What I absolutely recommend is that you live your values in an integrated way. Now, we're not all going to be perfect at every moment of the day. And so, I'm not trying to establish unrealistic expectations. But when it comes to where you bank and how you use your money and how you invest, you should think about how your values ought to inform that. That we're really explicit about that at Aspiration, I think, is another way in which we've created a different kind of relationship with people. That we've just owned the fact that, yeah, your money means something. Every time you use your money, you are making a political act. And instead of trying to hide from that, our view is we embrace that and make ourselves the partners of our customers. I'll share with you something that's about to occur, that's off the record, that is going to take this intention of Aspiration as a place that allows you to match your values and your money in a totally deeper and bigger way. Obviously, where you choose to bank matters because those banks use your deposits to fund projects. How you choose to invest matters because that's money you're giving companies to fund their operations. And how you spend your money matters. Now, this is a trickier part because, it's pretty transparent or at worst translucent about how banks use their money to invest in things. It's pretty transparent or at least translucent how you're investing your money in stocks of companies that pollute or don't pollute. It's a lot more opaque about how the businesses that you patronize with your consumption treat people on the planet. But I've always thought if we could make it at least translucent and maybe even transparent, there would be tens of millions of people that would want to match their values and their spending every day. All we have to do is make it easy for them. And so next month, we're launching something that we've been developing in stealth mode for 2 years called the Aspiration Impact Measurement. And I pause for effect because I even at risk of raising expectations, I truly think that this is going to be a revolutionary development in the financial industry. The Aspiration Impact Measurement, AIM for short, will score in your banking account on your Aspiration app every single day dynamically the businesses where you're spending money by their impact on the planet and on people, and recommend to you how you can make your spending more sustainable for the planet and for people, attached even to geolocated factors so that it becomes as specific as you spent money at this business in this zip code, and this company has a pretty bad planet and people score, and you're buying XYZ product. There's this other business that sells XYZ product at the same price that has a much higher planet and people score that's half a mile away, right in your Aspiration app. So we're going to deliver for you the tool to make super easy and convenient matching every dollar you spend with your values and how those values impact people on the planet. And so you can see the evolution of aspiration.com, that we're empowering you to match your banking and your values with our banking account. We're empowering you to match your investing and your values with our fossil fuel-free sustainable investing service. And now we're going to empower you to match your spending and your values. Because, it's kind of moving to close and take your questions. If you believe that we're human and that there's something mystical about being human that cannot be captured by numbers, right? If you believe that each one of us is absolutely different from the other, that the only way you could categorize all humans would be to create a Microsoft Excel that has a number of cells equal to the number of humans alive at any moment in time, then you also have to believe that the way we actually fix things starts with beliefs and values more than with technology or process. That the underpinning of how you fix stuff is the value and belief system that drives the processes you create. You know, I've laid forth to you a charge on the financial industry. I've laid forth today a charge on those 4 other big sectors. And the final and closing charge I'd lay is that there are some in the technology industry who are guilty of that same construct of thinking that we are units of things and that technology solves everything. Technology is extremely powerful. But what's healing? Beliefs and technology married together. What can make technology the key to creating a truly inclusive future that works for everyone is if technology is scaling these beliefs of love and compassion. But in the absence of those beliefs of love and compassion, then technology is just another evolution of this failed construct that we are units of things that can be reduced to Microsoft Excel sheets. You know, for me, my belief and conviction about this comes from my personal faith in God. But you don't have to believe in God to hold these truths. You just have to believe that there is something special and metaphysical about being human, that we're each created with a purpose, and that the choices we make matter. If you believe that, then we have to fix things.
Great. Let's give it. What an inspiring talk.
Thanks.
I'm sure that has generated in your mind lots of questions. So why don't we start? Questions, comments, remarks, clarifications that you need from Joe. Yes.
Have you tested AIM on any sort of like venture capitalist firms just for your guys' knowledge?
It's a great question. Yeah. High enthusiasm. Aspirations raised a bunch of venture capital already, though. So, yeah.
But this will require, I mean, you will need enormous databases, right?
That's what we've been building for the last 2 years in stealth mode, yeah. It's exciting because it's like, you know, you've been incubating this thing. It's like I would imagine it would be like being pregnant for 2 years and you can't tell anyone you're pregnant, and you think you're going to deliver this baby that's going to be really exciting. So in parallel to all of the things we've been doing that are customer facing, we've had this data team that's been building this.
Wow.
Yeah.
It seems like an amazing task.
Yeah, it's been a colossal task, but I think it'll be well worth it. You know, it's not going to be, obviously there's going to be some people who don't embrace that, but my view is that there are going to be tens of millions of people who do embrace it, and that those who do embrace it are going to be extremely passionate about it. That if you believe your money matters and that it ought to be matched to your values, you have those beliefs with conviction.
Questions? Yes. There's 2 of you there, so.
Yeah.
So how would AIM or could AIM, or is there some way to get down to the product level? Like, do you know what you're purchasing when you purchase Angel Soft tissue?
Yeah, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. Yeah, and the insights and bases for helping customers make their consumption choices are not going to be superficial first level and aren't going to be just based on general impressions and custom, right? I'll give you an example. Walmart is not the favorite company of progressives. I don't think that's controversial to say, right? But did you know that if you care about sustainable fishing, you should absolutely buy your fish at Walmart? That what they've done in promoting a sustainable fishing ecosystem is just incomparable to any other company. And so what this tool is going to permit is greater precision in how we match our money and our values, right? Because as we know, and going back to the idea of we're human and we're all different, there's nothing that's simple about that. And very few things are so black and white that they're good or evil, right? And so for all the problems, for example, with Walmart, the best thing you might be able to do when you're buying fish, if you care about the sustainability of the fishing supply chain, is buy fish at Walmart. And so it'll go down to much deeper levels of insights that I hope both will enthuse people, but also lead to really good outcomes and, equip people.
Do you anticipate that there might be, go back from the opposite side of the political spectrum? For instance, you get these warring cases of one side boycotting one side of the political spectrum, and the other side boycotting the other side. Can you envision a red state bloc or some other group getting together and producing kind of an oppositional database supporting, say, anti-progressive causes? Or so isn't technology then just going to be yet another tool in this?
Maybe, but maybe not. Let me tell you why maybe not. First, you might be interested to know that the aspiration customer base is very distributed across viewpoints, right? In fact, some have said that we're one of the few companies that has a customer base that's equal parts Bernie Sanders supporters and Trump supporters, right? The cross through believing and experiencing you're being screwed by the financial industry is not isolated to progressives, right? It's all of us. We're all being screwed. They're not targeting just progressive people. And the intention of aspiration isn't to create a Democratic Party-controlled society. It's to create sustainable outcomes in business. And well, statistically, maybe a bit more progressives are concerned about that. It is not accurate to say that that's a conviction that's monopolized by progressives, especially as you look at millennials, right? And so when we do political surveying of our customer base, it comes out, very distributed. The other thing I'd say about aspiration, which is an important validation of whether we're doing what we say we're doing, is our customers are very distributed geographically. So most early stage tech companies have early concentrations in the coasts and the big cities. And our concentrations are proportionate to where people actually live. So for example, 8% of our customers live in New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago. And when you talk to people in Silicon Valley, like, oh my God, it's amazing. That's so low. But that's just the number of people in those cities in proportion to the country. 8% of the country live in those cities, right? Half of our customer base is evenly mixed, men and women. We have customers that are wealthy. We have customers that are low income. We have customers that are middle income. One of the interesting operational challenges actually about aspiration is that as opposed to most companies that have, let me rewind. When you talk to investors, oftentimes they'll ask, what does your customer look like? Which builds on this exactly failed notion of like this transactional nature between a company and a customer, right? That you should be able to reduce your customer into a couple of statistics. And you probably have taken some statistics classes at UC Riverside, and you know that in particular, the mean and the median are only informative when contextualized with the breadth of the distribution, right? And so the mean and median of the statistics that characterize aspiration, right? When people ask, what's the median or mean income, or the median or mean age? Obviously, I can calculate that, but it's much less meaningful because the distribution is so broad. So what you always want to attach to those two things is where your 25th percentile and 75th percentiles are, right? So a quarter of our customers make less than $40,000. A quarter of our customers make more than $250,000. And the median income of our customers is $55,000. So I could tell you that the median income is $55,000, but in truth, that wouldn't tell you much at all about our customers because of that distribution, right?
What's the median age?
The median age is 35. A quarter of our customers are over 45. A quarter of them are under 25. That's the only one place where there's probably less distribution that's proportionate, because the penetration of online-only banking among consumers who are over 65 is much different than I'm more comfortable with that. That's just a reality of technology adoption. But even still, we have lots of customers who are in their 60s who are moved by the values of the company. And so, as trying to be as direct as possible, there are some folks who they don't come at us from like anti-progressive, right? Because we're delivering great services that people of all parts of the spectrum like. There are some clowns who say, well, you should only be investing in extractive industries or whatever. I mean, that fossil fuel is amazing and all that stuff, and that's cool. They make the point for me. Sometimes your critics can be your best friends because the absurdity of their criticism lays bare the effectiveness and wisdom of your own point. Yeah, hey. Oh, this is going to be a tough one.
So, Joe, I ask you as a self-declared liberal.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on trying to shore up Social Security as opposed to kind of enabling individuals to benefit themselves? Even with the progressive kind of investment.
Well, I think we should have Social Security for everyone. I think that we should have universal basic income for all Americans, and I'll bet you we will before our times are done. I think that.
Do you see the role for progressive capitalists to think differently and do differently from how they invest in the political sphere to make that happen, or do you think? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on how that change is going to happen, because it looks like Social Security, or especially the millennial set, there's a fair amount of anxiety.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to veer off into political prognostications now, so take that with a grain of salt. But I personally think that this moment in time is an aberration on a long-term trend towards progressive public policy. That read into this moment in time all the intensity of resistance that we need to administer. But I don't think you should read much into what this moment in time means about what national fiscal policy will look like in 20 and 30 years. If you really dig in to the attitudes of millennials, I think those attitudes would be supportive of that claim. And I think one of the hallmarks of what fiscal policy will look like in maybe as soon as 10 years is serious debate and consideration of universal basic income. And the role for progressive capitalists is by being tip of the spear, because as a progressive business person, you have credibility in championing for higher taxes on businesses. I think a human right that we should secure for all Americans is economic security. If you believe, as I do, that if you're living in this constant state of economic anxiety, a constant state of fight or flight, that you can't live to be fully human, then you sure as heck cannot think that securing everyone's economic security should be left to anyone else but all of us collectively in our government. I think it's the most fundamental charge, perhaps only rivaled by reversing the effect of climate change, that we need to deliver on as a generation. And I think there's one obvious and right answer, which is universal basic income. Now, within the universal basic income community, there's a lot of shades of the prescription, and it also is rife with a lot of potential pitfalls. So to define it, universal basic income, as you might infer, means that everyone gets a universal basic income that meets your basic needs, not an amount that ensures you can have a second car or the perfect home, with 4 bedrooms and a gated fence and 1.1 dogs, but an income that ensures you have basic economic security, right? That you're never stressed about food, transportation, shelter, clothing, and work.
In the U.S., for instance, it could be as little as $20,000 a year.
Yeah.
For every person.
That's right, exactly. For every person. Now, some people on the right actually are intrigued by this idea because they utilize it to advocate for the deconstruction of the state. That they say, instead of having any services delivered by the government, let's just give everyone $2,000 a month and then eliminate everything, right? And one of the reasons why I and about 50 other progressives co-founded the Economic Security Project about 4 months ago was because we want to define universal basic income in progressive terms, right? That in our judgment, well, it's not quite yet at the forefront of policy debates. It may be much sooner than any of us realize. And these coming, let's say, 4 to 8 years are going to define how people think about universal basic income. And I want to ensure that people think about it as a complement to all that exists rather than a replacement for all that exists, right? So that's one of the first reasons why I and other progressive business people are trying to lead on it. Second, I think it should be attached with service. There's disagreement among even progressive activists for universal basic income about this question. Should it be no matter what you do, you get $2,000 or $3,000 a month in combination with everything else? Or should we ask something of you in return, right? Something reasonable that everyone can do, but something nonetheless. And my personal view is, yeah, that the universal basic income movement can also attach itself to the movement for national service. That, and I'm spitballing here, but it could be things like, as a law-abiding American resident, you get universal basic income provided that you do a couple of years working as a teacher or working as a volunteer nurse caring for elders, or that you need to vote. Obviously, you need to abide by the law. That you can attach a whole host of really constructive things that asks of someone something in return. But there's debate on that and whatnot. The all underpinning of it is we should not have a future where 75% of people live in constant economic anxiety. And that the fix is not, let's retrain everyone, which I've been hearing about for 30 years, in which on the left we've actually not done much about. Or all the other things. I mean, think about all the problems of economic anxiety that have just been worsening for 30 years. It's now on our generation, Gen Xers and Millennials, we actually have to fix it, and fixing it is not going to be by relitigating and revisiting all of these marginal incremental policy changes around the edge, right? Which is why I think universal basic income, is so provocative and so compelling. If you'll indulge me just for one more moment, I think you're going to be shocked by how much sooner than people realize this is going to be centerpiece in the policy conversation. And you can hold me to this, and at risk of putting my foot in my mouth, change is happening faster today, across the board, right? You see so many examples of that. 2 years ago, I started talking with folks about universal basic income, and I was told by kind of progressives of the Bill Clinton era and before, yeah, maybe in 25 years people will take that idea seriously. And 2 years later, well, by no means is it at the tip of the progressive spear. I would argue that people are starting to take it pretty seriously and talk about it pretty seriously. Now, I don't think it's going to be the center of a 2020 presidential campaign, but I also wouldn't bet my life that it won't be.
And some countries have already started.
Yeah,
Finland, Switzerland.
yeah, exactly.
One point I think which you implied but it sort of didn't come through very clearly is that with the enormous advances in automation technology
Yeah.
that are coming about, in a sense you could argue that we cannot have automation technology on this scale without universal basic income.
Yeah.
So it almost has to happen.
Yeah, I think that's right. Now, I don't embrace this idea that we're going to be in this post-work world where no one is going to have jobs. I rather think we're going to be in this transition world where we're going to all have to figure out individually and collectively what the next nature of work is. Now, we've been in, if you will, transition phase A with globalization and free trade for 30 years. And for 30 years, folks have said, we got to do something for people who are going to be displaced. And we haven't done jack shit. And I use that for effect because we haven't. You go back and take up tapes from the early 90s, the 92 presidential campaign, all these other things. We've talked about worker training for 30 plus years. We haven't done anything aggressive about it, right? And now we're facing transition 2.0 with automation. And it requires an order of magnitude more than what we should have done on globalization and free trade. Not an order of magnitude more than what we actually did do, which is not very much. And so the provocativeness of universal basic income is proportionate to the scale of the transition that I think we're facing. And by the way, I think millennials, if they don't articulate this consciously, they perceive it intuitively, which is why these ideas, I think, have particular resonance among millennials. Yeah.
Joe, that was a great talk. Really interesting. One of the things you brought up was this shift of political mobilization around consumption versus
Yeah.
we used to do it with work.
Yeah.
And I want to just hear your thoughts on this because, I mean, one concern I have is that with workplaces, we had like a social quality. We came together at workplaces, we joined unions, and we found solidarity in that common place, right? And I worry a little bit that consumption-based mobilization does, and maybe social media is the answer there, but how are we going to be able to get that solidarity and that social quality of bringing people together on causes through consumption that we got through the workplaces?
Well, first, utilizing the power of consumption to affect change, we're in like not even the first inning. I mean, there's barely anything being done about it, which is why I'm so passionate about what we're going to try and do at Aspiration with AIM. To your comparison with the solidarity that comes at being in the same place at work, I would, with respect, say that's an accurate description of the history of organizing, but I don't think it's an accurate premise to understand the future of organizing, even if it's work-related. I think one of the challenges that even work-related organizing faces is that an increasing amount of work isn't place-based. An increasing amount of our solidarity isn't place-based. And I'd submit a question without my own personal certainty of the answer is, does solidarity require place? Or does it require idea and belief? I personally think that you can build solidarity based on shared values and belief rather than being in the same room. And I think there's early signs in social media that suggest that. But whether organizing moves or includes consumption, but I'm not suggesting that we move away from workplace organizing or work-based organizing. I'm suggesting that we combine work organizing and consumer organizing, right? But I think one of the problems with work organizing is that it's so place-based. And I think that's one of the challenges that unions and the labor movement have to overcome. And with millennials, it's even less workplace-based, which is why union adoption among millennials is, so much lower. Yeah.
Well, I just follow up on
Yeah.
that. I was going to say, one thing that's kind of interesting and it's different in some other countries is to be a member of a labor union, you would get unemployment insurance. And that's why the Scandinavian labor unions are so strong. Is
Yeah.
that if you want unemployment insurance, you have to join the union. And I was just thinking like something like Aspiration could link up with labor unions, for
Yeah.
example, and say that like, you want these services, membership is part of the deal. And so it'd be interesting to see progressive capitalists lead in linking these sorts of solidaristic organizations with certain services that people want.
So that's an important insight. I would twist it, I would change it a little bit. I wouldn't say that you make it obligatory, but I'd rather say that the way you revitalize interest in membership of anything is you have to make that membership relevant. And whether it's unions or any membership organization, those organizations are struggling with millennial membership because they aren't redefining how they're relevant to those members. And so I think the exciting opportunity for Aspiration is this notion of service-oriented growth where you partner with membership organizations and deliver your services in attachment with them to make their membership more meaningful to members, right? Anil mentioned Cali ITC for me and didn't quite get to it in my talk, but ultimately what we're doing at Cali ITC is about creating service-oriented organizing. We start by reaching low-income families to give them free tax preparation services and get them the thousands of dollars from their EITC, which is the delivery of a meaningful service. And then around that, you build a whole integrated suite of organizing, which is in contrast, I think, to the way that political advocacy has been done in the last couple of decades, which is more elite-driven, which is more about advertising to folks to go vote for something. Whatever a politician might think, when you're engaging first with people in asking them to vote for something, you are not engaging them first in a service to them. Right? And sales 101 is, if you want to build enthusiasm of your counterparty to do something, first you got to deliver a bunch of things to that counterparty that they value. And one of the things one of the reasons I think mass media oriented advocacy has started to generate very diminishing marginal returns is that people hear all this stuff on TV and they're like, vote for this, that, or the other, and whatnot. And it's the first engagement of them that's asking them to do something that's not obviously in service of themselves, right? But instead, I think if you rip that playbook up and build advocacy around first reaching people in the delivery of services that they need, maybe it's their taxes being done for free, or getting their EITC, or getting their child tax care credit, or ACA enrollment, right? All those things, those are more meaningful first touch points that build a more durable platform of trust that enables advocacy later.
Kurt, you had a question?
Yeah.
Potential investors, we talked about this a bit before, because I'm coming at this from, say, an environmental economics and benefit cost analysis perspective.
Yeah.
You think about the Office of Management Budget, any regulation that the government wants to impose that's over $200 million, they have to do what's called an RIA, regulatory impact assessment.
Yeah.
Where they look at the benefits of the regulation versus the costs of the regulation.
Yeah.
And so some of the benefits of regulations are cleaner air, cleaner water, less noise, etc. And to some extent, you can see people making these decisions when they purchase houses, right? Houses with cleaner air, prices are higher.
Yeah.
Poor air. And in your sense, what you're doing is you're offering that kind of premium as well, and you're in the choices and investments people make in their bank account, right?
Yeah.
So you'll see that people may be willing to pay a premium for something that's more environmentally sustainable or less extractive. In that sense, that could feed into these types of regulatory impact assessments, because otherwise we have to go and do surveys and just like time.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So I wonder if you thought about that angle at all. You really, if your sample is representative,
Yeah.
then looking at how people make those choices can help inform regulations at the federal, probably even the state level, in terms of what makes sense from a society's viewpoint.
Yeah, the problem with the problem with RIA is that it doesn't account for the impact of regulated. It doesn't account for the impact that making practices more sustainable has on the implicit discount rate implied to capitalizing all this stuff, right? Let me describe it in a different way. Sustainable investing, sustainable business practices, if you believe in efficient market theory, it's like absolutely what you should do. It's the right, smart, factual thing to do, beyond just being the right thing to do. Because in efficient market theory, the value of a firm is the discounted sum of all of its future cash flow. And the variable in that calculation that's most important is the discount rate you apply to the future. And the discount rate you apply to the future is based on the uncertainty or certainty of the future. And so if you believe that sustainability is a synonym of certainty, which I do, then two practices, one that's sustainable, one that's not. The sustainable practice just makes that more valuable. Dollar for dollar, $1 of sustainable profit is more valuable than $1 of unsustainable profit. A 20-year cash flow stream that shows the same undiscounted sum as a 20-year cash flow stream delivered unsustainably, right? The sustainable one's more valuable because you apply a lower discount rate to the out years, which means the future is more valuable in the present. Now, that's taken on a microeconomic level. I think on a macroeconomic level that you could apply it to all of the kinds of implicit discount rates that capital markets imply to projects, right? I haven't borne out the data in quite the same way I have on a microeconomic level, but I don't see why that same logic wouldn't apply between the micro and the macro. I want to say one thing about regulation, if I may. Recognizing that I'm a passionate progressive, I've also realized that we're thinking about regulation in the wrong way. We need to think about it on a different axis. Instead of more or less, effective or ineffective, we need to think about the beneficiary of regulation. What I've realized is that the concentration of economic power in some of our big industries is in part the result of a lot of regulation that advantages incumbents. Weirdly, if you unpack it, a lot of big companies that you think might hate regulation freaking love regulation because they lobby to make sure that the regulation is written in a way that advantages and creates barriers to entry against their competitors, right? And so I submit that we need to look at regulation through two lenses. One, what it does to protect consumers, and two, what it does or does not do to stifle or promote economic dynamism. And I could give a whole nother talk on this question, so I'll just leave it with a provocative thought. Could it be that at the heart of all the concentration of wealth and the economic anxiety that that causes, could it be at the heart of that is in part economic power has been concentrated in an increasingly tiny number of firms? And this is across every single statistic you can find. The percentage of corporate profits that are earned by the 500 largest firms of total profits has tripled in the last 20 years. And there are all kinds of political and economic reasons for that. And regulation and how regulations have been built to advantage incumbents is one of the big reasons. Yeah.
Bill Clinton, when he left office, he did this speech on non-zero-sum gains solutions and zero-sum. Basically, zero-sum being there's a winner and there's a loser. If I'm understanding you and aspiration and aim, the kind of currency that's holding this all together is trust. And
Yeah.
that trust is then the non-zero-sum solution that kind of makes everything go around. I mean, by allowing your customers to decide what to pay, nobody's essentially going to ever say, I'm getting screwed. You're solving a huge problem, and when you do it into new industries, I'm just blown away. Never mind.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I agree with you. The zero-sum game is, in my view, wrong. It's inhuman. If you think back on what I said, which I think was inarguably a very progressive message and prescription, I didn't talk at all about rich people need to be less rich. I don't really care that much how rich a certain number of people are. What I care about is that every single person has economic security to live fully human, right? Now, it may be that we need to distribute money away from wealthy people to everyone else to create that economic security. But I also think, if you believe as I do, that we're all interconnected and you understand how consumption drives a free market democratic capitalism, if we suddenly create economic security for tens of millions of households that don't have it, then those tens of millions of households are going to be much bigger participants in our economy, which means that the folks from whom at the beginning maybe we're distributing to create economic security for everyone, I actually think will be better off in the long run because there's going to be more consumption at the businesses that they own. And so they're going to have less of a pie that's going to be a much bigger pie.
We have time for maybe one more question.
Yeah.
From a student. Yes.
So I'm really fascinated by this alternative business model that you
Yeah.
have, and I was wondering what measures or implications do you have to keep your business on that model and not derailing into a less customer service oriented model? Like practically speaking, if I wanted to make a business like that, what would I have to make sure that I do to keep it that way, so that it's not different from my vision in that model?
Well, you have to build the model of the business in perfect alignment with your vision. And if you do that, then if you ever stray from your vision and purpose, the business will fail. Therefore, you won't do it. Right? If we ever strayed from the purpose and principles of aspiration.com, the business would be toast. Now, we're not going to stray from it because this is my heart and soul, But even beyond that, if we stray from it, we'd be toast. Our customers have joined us because of these values and these services and this kind of relationship, And if we strayed from that, then there'd be no business. And that's the description of perfect alignment of the model and your values.
Well, on that note, I should say, let's thank Joe for a very inspiring but also provocative speech.
Thanks.
And I think it's very useful for us, for especially the students, to know that there are small ways in which you can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't go out and do volunteering, just how you organize your purchases, your spending can make a difference.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great takeaway.
Thanks so
Thank you
much. Thanks for having me. Thanks.